Well, maybe I'll go ahead and start and get all our talking out of the way. And then when people show up, as they will, we have about 5 minutes worth of talking to do. Welcome everyone to the club lunch. Thanks for attending. The goal of the club is to bring together all Democrats from the most conservative to the most progressive to celebrate our shared values, appreciate who we are, and work together to put more Democrats in office. I'd like to acknowledge our club lunch sponsor, Albrechta and Albrechta Law Firm. They've been supporting this lunch for several years now. So if you need legal help, please think about Albrechta and Albrechta here in Durango. Our speaker today will be Colorado Ceasefire's Tom Mauser. He's the father of Columbine shooting victim Daniel Mauser and a longtime gun safety activist. We'll learn from him how we all can keep our communities safer. So everyone is asked to stay muted except for the speakers, myself, and Gwen Unger, who will be helping me with questions. If you want to submit a question that's different from the ones we're asking during the lunch, please use the chat feature on Zoom. Please do not unmute yourself and speak, but send your questions to everyone in the chat window, and we'll get to it. If you're having trouble with internet connectivity, you may want to disable your video. Audio only works better on slower connections. This Zoom meeting is being recorded and will be available within a day or so for viewing on the Dems website, laplatadem's.org. You can choose speaker mode, typically in the upper right corner, which will bring up a larger video of the person speaking. I would like to encourage everyone to donate to the La Plata County Dems in this non-election year. It keeps our office rented and we can accumulate funds ahead of need for next year. Monthly donations are particularly appreciated and you can set those up on ActBlue. They make it easy for you to give to the party with relatively little pain. This is our 6th club luncheon for 2023. We're working hard to bring some more great programs. We're skipping the month of August and we will resume via Zoom in September. If anyone has announcements to make, please enter it in the chat and we'll recognize you at the end of the lunch. So now I'm going to introduce our speaker, Pat Mauser. In partnership with the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment Office of Gun Violence Prevention, Colorado Ceasefire offers training on 2 critical gun violence prevention tools that all of us should be aware of. One is the Extreme Risk Protection Orders, which is called ERPO, and Safe Storage of Firearms. Tom Mauser is the father of Columbine victim Daniel Mauser and a longtime gun safety activist. He'll speak to all of us about how we can keep communities safer. Colorado Ceasefire is the longest running grassroots gun violence prevention organization throughout the state of Colorado. The organization is composed of parents, teachers, students, community members, gun violence survivors, and more who have been working since 2000 to prevent and reduce gun violence in Colorado. They provide education, outreach, and legislative advocacy to create safer communities. Let's welcome Tom Mauser.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for joining in on this session. We have been working hard on the both the outreach end as well as legislative end at Colorado Ceasefire. And, you know, we've seen the passage of a number of gun laws in the state. But, you know, gun law is only good if people know about it and understand it and have a good idea what it's about, so they can talk about it with others and share that. So that's what I'm planning to do today. And I'm going to start off by sharing my screen and hope that it works this time and that I'm not going to be struggling with it. And let's see what happens. Am I up?
Yes.
All right. Okay. That's good. Let me go to the full screen here. Okay, you're seeing the full screen? Okay, great. All right. So a little bit about Ceasefire. Karen's already pointed some of that out. Our mission is to reduce gun violence in Colorado. Our vision is to have a state free from gun violence. As Karen pointed out, I'm on the board of Colorado Ceasefire. I've been on the board for over 22 years, since almost near the beginning, back in 2000. And father of Columbine victim Daniel Mauser. Daniel was 15 when he was killed at Columbine. He was a former Boy Scout. Played piano, liked to play video games. He was a straight A student at Columbine, and like the others, he just did not deserve what happened to him. No surprise that in Colorado, the gun violence is increasing in our country. You hear the stories. Unfortunately, most people tend to hear about the mass shootings, and that's what they react to. But really, this the day-to-day gun violence, and a lot of those mass shootings are domestic shootings, and unless it happens in your community or your state, you often don't even hear about it unless it's a really high body count. We have the highest number of gun deaths on record in both the U.S. and in Colorado in 2021. In the U.S., it was over 48,000 firearm deaths. Majority of those were suicides. In Colorado in 2021, the number was 1,076. And probably, as with me, you're not seeing all of the charts because our video was over there on the right side. But I probably don't need to tell you that the chart is going up in terms of gun deaths. Colorado was no exception in all of this. Our firearm death rate was higher than the U.S. rate every year between 2014 and 2021. Now you might say, well, gee, if it's higher than the U.S. rate, are we like in the top 10 in gun death rates? Well, no, not really, because when you look at those averages, some of the states that have the lowest gun death rates are states like California, Massachusetts, and New York, which are high population states. They have strong gun laws, but still, we're higher than that national average. Our suicide rate is much higher than the national average, very unfortunately. 63% higher than the U.S. rate in 2021. Between the years of 2014 and 2021, our firearm deaths increased by 62%. And that's not based on population, because population only increased by 9%. So our big idea is, while it's a really critical issue, and I know at times people think that they feel helpless. There's just nothing they can really do about it. But we really believe that in particular by promoting safe storage of people's firearms and the use of risk protection orders, the red flag laws, as it's often called, and by giving people well-grounded information and really cutting down on the myths that are out there, the misinformation, we really can do something to make it a safer place from gun violence. So what I'm going to be talking about today, I better not be looking at this screen too much. I forget how that right side of the screen, I can't read and you can't either. But I'm going to be talking today, I have to do some of this from memory, two particular laws. Again, the safe storage law and the ERPO law. The ERPO is extreme risk protection order. Now, in Colorado, we don't actually have restraining orders per se. The term that's used is protection order rather than restraining order like they use in other states. So an extreme risk protection order. Most people know it by the name red flag, a red flag law. Some people in the mental health community would prefer that we not use the term red flag. But the reality is that the media and most people in the public know it by the name red flag. So I'm going to use both terms, ERPO and red flag, interchangeably. The safe storage law simply requires that firearms be responsibly and securely stored when they're not in use, so that we can prevent access to unsupervised juveniles and other unauthorized people, like people who were not by law allowed to have a firearm. The red flag, as you probably know, allow certain people to file a risk protection, an extreme risk protection order against a person that is considered to be potentially a danger to themselves or others. Okay, first I'm going to talk just a little bit about the safe storage law. You can well understand why this law is important to prevent injuries, suicides, mass shootings. Look at the data. 350 children in the US unintentionally shoot themselves or someone else every year. 350. And I think you can pretty well guess that in most cases, those guns are coming from their own home. 80% of mass shooters under the age of 18 got their gun from the home of their own home or from the home of a friend or relative. And this last number, what is it? I forget what that one is.
You want me to read it?
Oh, you can read it and I can't?
Yeah.
Okay.
It says 700 children in the US die by gun suicide each year, most often using guns belonging to a family member.
Thank you. And yes, I just realized I can just move my photo or my video box here to read them. So you won't have to do that anymore. Okay. 54% of gun owners do not lock all of their guns securely. That's pretty disturbing. Not just if they have kids, but also if they have grandkids, of course, that come to their home.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, we have then about 5.4 million children living in a home with at least one unlocked and loaded firearm. Not a safe situation. So as a result, we end up seeing headlines like this: 2-year-old shoots himself with a handgun. Parents facing charges after 2-year-old accidentally shoots himself in the stomach. 4-year-old boy accidentally shoots himself and a toddler with the handgun. And it also happens in Colorado. Monte Vista teen killed while filming TikTok video. 9-year-old boy accidentally shot in the head in Trinidad and dies. So we see too much of this, and these really are preventable. One thing that we sometimes hear from the gun lobby is, well, you know, more people die from car crashes, and I don't hear you talking about banning cars. Well, the reality is that now we're reaching the point where car crash deaths are actually going down, and in many states, including Colorado, we're losing more people, especially young people, to gun violence more so than from car crashes. So we really encourage people to think of safe storage much as we think of car seats for children. There are steps that you can take to better protect your child. So we encourage the people to, if you have guns, keep your guns yours. Safely storing your guns will deter theft and prevents your firearms from entering the illegal market. So, you know, sometimes we have people who like to have these signs in their front of their house, you know, this home protected by Smith & Wesson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that may not deter all criminals. In some cases, that may be a sign to them, oh, there's a gun in the home. I better case this house, find out when they're not home. I break into this home, I'm going to get a gun. I'm going to get a Smith & Wesson. Next, if you do find that your firearm has been lost or stolen, in Colorado, it is required that you report that within 5 days of discovering that loss. And an important reason we do this is it helps in solving crimes better, because if you have someone that commits a crime with a gun and simply says, oh, it was stolen from my home. Well, gee, if you didn't report that, you know, how can we really believe that? It's better protection for you if you report that it was stolen. That way, if it's used in a crime, you reported the fact that it was stolen. Okay, that gives you a better cover in that case. What can you do? Things that you can do if you're a gun owner in your own home, your community. Unload that firearm, lock it up, and separate it. Separate the two, so the ammunition from the firearm. And I realize, you know, there are people some people in the gun lobby who say, oh, well, if you do that, you know, what are you going to do when there's a home intrusion, a home invasion, home intrusion? Well, the reality is that someone committing suicide, a child getting access to a gun, that is much more common than is a home invasion. Home invasions really don't happen as often as the gun lobby would like to have you believe that they happen.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when they do, it's someone like a drug dealer. And I can see why they might indeed want to have their gun handy and loaded, but also they're doing an illegal activity. There's lots of ways to do that. You have full-size gun safes. If you have a collection of firearms, you have lock boxes. There are gun cases and gun safes for your car. So that way, if you have a concealed carry permit and carry a concealed weapon and you're going to a place where they don't allow you to carry concealed, you can keep it in your car. You have gun cases, trigger locks, just $15 to $30. Some organizations, we have a connection with some organizations that give them away for free, in fact, because we just want to make sure that people secure their firearm. And then there's cable locks that are also pretty inexpensive. Another important part of this is talk to your child's friends' parents. So if you have a child and they're playing in somebody else's house, it's important to know if they've got a firearm and whether it's secured or not in that home. And I know that can be kind of a sticky thing for people. Well, how do I ask without kind of upsetting them? Well, we suggest one way to do that is to say something like this. You know, my child is really curious, does a lot of exploring. I just want to make sure there are no unsecured firearms in your house, because I'd really hate for them to be exploring and find that and lead to an accident. Another thing you can do is talk to your kids. Teach them that guns are not toys. Teach them what to do if they come across a gun, which is basically stop, run away, tell an adult. They've done some maybe slightly unscientific, but they've done some studies showing children and what they do if you tell them not to touch a gun. You can tell them and tell them and tell them, and the studies have shown that a number of kids, when they come across a gun, will still touch it. That curiosity factor, that not listening to the parents factor, comes into play. Next, I just want to point out that there is a penalty for failing to secure firearms. It's actually the lowest level misdemeanor, so it's not a high penalty. But we think we would have liked to have had it higher. But I think what's most important is the fact that it is law. We can say to people, it is law. So if you are indeed a law-abiding citizen, like gun owner, as you'd like to say, well, then you really need to secure your firearm because it's the law. And we also like to point out that, no, the police don't inspect houses or break down doors. We hear this from the gun lobby. Oh, is this how they're enforcing this law? No, unfortunately, it's mostly if something terrible happens, or if it just somehow becomes known that somebody accessed a firearm, that the law comes into play. Okay, next I'm going to go to and spend a little bit more time on the ERPO law, the red flag law that we have in Colorado. It was passed in 2019. One thing that really helped bring it about was the terrible shooting in Highlands Ranch, suburb of Denver, where a deputy sheriff's officer was killed by somebody, and in that case, red flag might have prevented that. And in fact, this law is named after Deputy Sheriff Zachary Parrish. Okay, here I'm gonna go ahead and play a video that provides some background, and hopefully you can hear them. I'm gonna turn my sound up. I tested this with somebody last night, and they said it worked okay. Please raise your hand or somebody pipe in if you aren't able to hear this.
Do you know someone at risk of suicide or violence against others who has access to a firearm? Gun violence takes the lives of over 800 Coloradans every year, and the vast majority of these gun deaths are suicides. In Colorado, you have a tool to help a loved one from harming themselves or others. An extreme risk protection order law, also known as ERPO, was created to temporarily prevent someone at risk of harm from buying or having access to guns. Family or household members, in addition to law enforcement, can request an ERPO. If the threat of violence requires immediate attention, you can request a temporary ERPO that is considered the day that it is filed. If granted, the temporary ERPO will last up to 2 weeks ahead of a full hearing for a final order that is in effect for up to 364 days. Depending on the immediate level of risk, you can file directly for a final ERPO. This process would require a hearing, at which both parties may participate. How do I use it? You can go to the district or county court where your loved one resides and file a petition. They will then be informed and given a copy of the petition. A hearing with a judge will determine if your loved one is at high risk and should have the ERPO take effect. If an ERPO is issued, firearms must be surrendered to law enforcement or sold to a federally licensed firearm dealer, putting time and space between an at-risk individual and a firearm. An ERPO can be renewed after 1 year if the risk of violence remains. Once the order expires, the firearms are returned. Why should I use this tool? If you know someone who is at risk of harming themselves or others and has access to a firearm, an ERPO can be a life-saving resource. ERPOs have been used in efforts to prevent mass shootings, suicides, and domestic violence. ERPOs are a proactive way to prevent unnecessary harm. Interested in learning more? Visit americanhealth.jhu.edu/implement-ERPO for a step-by-step guide on how to use this tool. Together, we can prevent gun violence. We are not providing legal advice. Every factual situation is unique, and if an individual wants legal advice specific to their particular circumstances, they should consult knowledgeable counsel.
Okay, that was a really quick look at ERPO, and if you didn't capture all that, that's okay, because I'm going to be covering it in a little bit more detail, give you a better idea. So how does a ERPO help those who are in crisis? Because that's especially what this is about, is someone who is in crisis. They're in extreme risk. Well, it removes gun access to them, and it helps to enable them to seek treatment, to stabilize their behaviors, to get their access to the resources to address the causes of what may be those dangerous behaviors of theirs. Okay, what are those dangerous behaviors, and what kinds of behaviors might indicate that an ERPO is needed? Well, if someone expresses suicidal thoughts, they have a history of domestic violence, if they've had demonstrated signs of being dangerous, they've made threats of violence, have a history of violence, or if they have unsafe behavior with firearms. Those would be the kind of situations where you would want to consider filing an ERPO. So who can actually file an ERPO? As I said in the video, household members can do that. Who is a household member? I'm going to get into that in a second. Law enforcement officers. And law enforcement includes the Colorado Attorney General, district attorneys, and designees of the district attorneys. That was how the bill that was passed in 2019 listed family members and law enforcement. That has now been expanded. Just this year, a bill was passed, governor signed it, to include some other community members, licensed healthcare professionals. So doctors, psychiatrists, professionals like that can now file an ERPO. Mental health professionals, educators and school administrators, and that could be either public, private, or charter. And then higher education faculty members can also file an ERPO. So what is a household? Who's a household member? It's anybody that's related by blood, marriage, or adoption. Any place where you have a child in common. Anybody who's resided with the respondent in the last 6 months. Anybody who's a domestic partner, step-parents, stepchildren, grandparents, grandchildren, legal guardians, or someone who's a past or present married or unmarried couples can file an ERPO. So what are some of the options? How does this work with the red flag law? What are the options? Okay, first there is a TERPO, a temporary ERPO. A temporary ERPO lasts 14 days. And you can have situations where someone just uses the 14 days hoping to calm down some situation or some dangerous behavior. Or somebody can go for a full year ERPO, which is 365 days. This next line, that should have been taken out. There is no lifetime ERPO. It would have to be renewed every year. In each of these cases, law enforcement will remove the firearms from the respondent. Okay, the person who files the petition is the petitioner. The person they're filing against it is the respondent. So they would law enforcement will remove firearms to ensure the respondent cannot legally purchase any firearms. So what they're doing, they're going to federal database and putting their name in the federal database so that that person cannot purchase a firearm from a licensed dealer because their name will be on the cannot buy list. And also the respondent has to surrender their concealed carry permit if they have one. Okay, how does a person file an ERPO? A petitioner can fill out and file the application directly with the county or district court. And it's really important to note, and it's really important that people other than law enforcement are aware of this, because some people have had trouble filing petitions. They're not quite sure how to go about it. The courts can provide assistance. Most courts, if not all, will have somebody that's there to provide assistance to the public. In some places, they're called, believe it or not, Sherlocks. You can go into the county, the court clerk's office and say you want assistance. Do you have a Sherlock? Do you have someone that provides assistance to the public? So once you file a petition, a hearing must be held before a judge within 24 hours. So when we say extreme risk, that's why it's within 24 hours, because it has to be something where, you really consider there's something could happen soon. So it must be within 24 hours, and the petitioner must attend a hearing on that petition in person. They must be ready to attend in person before the judge. Now, a petitioner can also contact a member of law enforcement to discuss their concerns. So if somebody's not quite sure, is this rise to that level? Or it might be that they've heard, which is the truth, they've heard that petitions that come from non-law enforcement people don't usually do as well as ones that are filed by law enforcement. So one thing you could do is to go to law enforcement, and what may happen is they may investigate the concern, and then they could be the ones that submit the petition to the court. So that's another option. There was recognition that you might have low-income people. The respondent might be someone who's low income, and they say, "Oh my God, my firearm has been removed. There's going to be a hearing. I need legal assistance." So we arrange it so that in the law states that the state will provide free legal assistance if they request it. There's also an organization called Bridge to Justice that's a 501c3 that will also provide legal services for either ERPO petitioners. I think they will, and they also will provide it to the respondents. And if you use this QR code that's here, that will connect you with them. And if they can't help somebody, they'll find someone else that they'll connect you with somebody else who can. So that needing the legal assistance should not be a barrier for people. Also, coming this month, we haven't seen it yet. The state, by law, has been required to set up a hotline to answer people's questions. That's going to be in the Department of Public Health and Safety. Oh no, within the Department of Public Safety. I'm sorry. 24/7 hotline. Hopefully, that's going to happen soon. Okay, what happens when an ERPO terminates or expires? So once it expires, the firearms are returned to the person within 3 days after the respondent requests their return. But that's only if the respondent is eligible to possess a firearm. So if they committed a felony, for example, in the meantime, well, they wouldn't be able to get their firearm back. The National Federal Database is informed, it's updated, so that person can go back to being able to purchase a firearm. And then they may also reapply for their concealed carry permit. But really, I want to go back this for a second, because one thing that isn't covered in this shorter version of the presentation. So there's two levels here. There's a temporary, and then there's a, well, it's called a permanent, but it's a 1-year ERPO. So what happens is a petitioner goes before a judge, and they ask that an extreme risk protection order be placed on the respondent. If the judge grants that, the respondent, first, law enforcement is informed of this, and law enforcement will inform the respondent. They will serve a warrant on them to remove their firearms, and they will inform them that within no more than 14 days, a hearing will be held where they can present their side of the story. They can make their case for whether that protection order will be extended for a full year. It's a really important part of this. There's first hearing before the judge is where the petitioner comes in. If the judge issues the protection order, then law enforcement takes the next step of retrieving firearms from that person, putting their name in the federal database so they can't purchase a firearm, and then informing them that there's going to be a hearing within 14 days, and the respondent can then go to that hearing and state their case. Also, if then a 1-year temporary order, 1-year protection order is put in place, one time during that year, the respondent can go before the judge and say, "Hey, I've gotten counseling, or I'm not in a bad situation right now. I feel like I'm okay. I'm not a danger." They can state their case, and the judge can rule on that, or the judge can say, "No, it's going to stay in place for the rest of the year." They have one chance to do that. So, ERPO, we have ERPO laws in 21 states now. It's been increasing quite a bit. You will see it's mostly blue states, other than the red state of Florida because of what happened at Parkland, and also the red state of Indiana, which was one of the first states actually to have it. And it's been in place there, I think, at least 10, 15 years in a red state. We think that ERPO laws are important because they really can save lives. We believe that here in Colorado, there are a number of cases where ERPO might have saved the day, saved some lives. In 2021, we had the 5 people that were killed in what's generally recalled as the Denver tattoo shop shooting. A man shot a number of murdered 5 people in a few different locations. Police knew that he was a danger, and really Denver police, we think, should have really pursued an ERPO on him. At the King Super shooting in Boulder, a family was concerned about their son, especially when he purchased a gun. They say they didn't know about the red flag law. Maybe if they had known about it and used it, maybe that would have saved some lives. And then the most recent Colorado Springs Club Q shooting. The sheriff's office knew that the shooter there was dangerous, and in fact had taken firearms away from him, but because he wasn't convicted of a felony, and there was no red flag placed on him, he was able to somehow go out and purchase other weapons that he used at Club Q. I'm going to go past these examples. There are some other examples. Some research has shown that for every 10 to 20 protection orders that are granted, there is a death by suicide prevented. What can you do to help? I think one of the most important things is to educate yourself. You can go to our website and review the information that we have there in more detail than what I'm presenting here. Another really, really important part of it is to spread the word about this law. It's really important that people know about this law and how it works, or how it doesn't work. Talk to a friend about it. Share the handouts. Not sure if somebody gave you something in advance. If not, we'll make sure we get something to you so that you people have something in print about this. Share this on social media. Host an informational meeting in your community. So if you belong to a let's say a club, some other organization, I'm trying to think, Rotary Club, something like that. We're more than happy to have somebody come in and make a presentation, or do it by Zoom, presentation like this, so that people know. And we can gear the length of the presentation based on how much time they have available. Another really important thing you can do is listen for the disinformation and myths, and be prepared to respond to it, just as I'm going to do right now, because we know there's a lot of misinformation and myths out there, especially from people who oppose this law. So I'm going to go over some of these and give you our answer to these myths and bits of misinformation. The first myth is ERPO law, the red flag law, is unconstitutional. It's an infringement on one's right to bear arms. And our response is, this law has been challenged in 2 particular states, and it was held to be constitutional. And especially based on the fact that the Second Amendment is not unlimited. If you remember what Justice Scalia said in the Washington, D.C. Heller versus Heller case, that ruling made it clear that the Second Amendment is not unlimited. It doesn't provide an absolute right to bear arms. Second myth, it doesn't provide due process. Okay, usually when they say this, they're referring to especially the fact that in that description I gave you of what happens in the hearing. In the first hearing, the respondent is not present. Only the petitioner is present. The respondent isn't there. So opponents of this law say, well, that's not legal because they're not there. You know, they're being charged with a crime. They're having their firearms taken away unconstitutionally. They aren't even there. Our strong belief and other things have borne this, that this law does include due process protections. Now, it is true that they are not there at that first hearing, but the strong feeling is that this is actually a very much safer situation, especially for law enforcement and for people who were suicidal. Because if you allow that respondent to be at the first hearing, what you're doing is you're tipping them off in advance. And I think you can well imagine the kind of things that could go wrong if you tell somebody who is suicidal or who wants to commit a workplace shooting or a mass shooting, oh, there's going to be a hearing. We invite you to this hearing at which we could order you give up your firearms. That could become a very dangerous situation for any number of people. And there's actually precedence for this. This same procedure, what's called ex parte, where the respondent is not present, this same ex parte procedure is used in domestic violence protection orders. So when there's a domestic violence protection order, the same thing happens. Spouse goes to the judge and asks for a protection order. Their spouse is not there for that. And it's recognized why that's important to have it that way, because you don't want that spouse killing their spouse because this order is going to be put in place. Next myth is there are other less drastic ways to address this problem, somebody who's in a crisis, like an M1 hold. M1 hold is the term we give in Colorado for a 72-hour mental health hold. The fact is that most, this says many, but I think most M1 holds are a lot less than 72 hours. Why? Because they've got a limited number of beds in Colorado for M1 holds. They just can't keep people there for a long time. But even more important, the fact is that people aren't somehow magically cured in that 72 hours or less. Usually to calm them down, maybe see if there's some medication they can give them or somebody they can refer them to. But then at the end of that 72 hours or less, they're returned home. And if there's a firearm in that home, they're returning to that firearm and maybe to the same danger. So in many cases, no, an M1 hold really isn't enough. The next myth is this law is going to be abused by police, ex-girlfriends, co-workers, hateful neighbors, any number of people. And I've even heard, oh, this is really something Rocky Mountain gun owners are saying, really the intent of our legislators was to grab as many guns from law-abiding citizens as they possibly can. Well, let's look at the facts here. First of all, we have a limited number of petitioners. Ex-girlfriends, co-workers, hateful neighbors, they cannot petition. Now, they could go to the police and ask them to file, but again, they're going to have to state their case. And they have to provide evidence. This is an evidence-based petition process. More important, other ways that you prevent abuse. In the case of a temporary ERPO, the petitioner must establish by a preponderance of the evidence that a person poses a significant risk of injury to themselves or others. Preponderance of evidence. When it goes to the next hearing, if you're requesting a full year ERPO, it's a higher bar even than that. It has to be clear and convincing evidence that they pose a danger to themselves or others. Also, the petitioner has to submit an affidavit signed under oath and under penalty of perjury if they perjure themselves. Also, a person who files a malicious or knowingly false petition could be subject to a criminal prosecution or civil liability for that malicious or false petition. So there are things that are there to prevent abuse like that. Next, they say law enforcement must be blowing down doors to confiscate firearms, and that's really not the case. They're using a search warrant, and savvy officers know how to carry this out safely. But related to that, okay, the next thing is retrieving firearms puts law enforcement at risk when they go out to try to retrieve a firearm, and that is true. It's never safe to go out to somebody and say, I'm here to retrieve your firearms. You must surrender them. It is risk. But the feeling is, the strong belief is, it's a much, much greater risk if nothing is done. And also, again, greater risk if you tell them in advance you're going to be taking the firearms. Most savvy law enforcement officers know how to do this. You get an idea what the person's movements are when they're going to work. You find a safe situation where you approach them with the warrant, so that you could then serve the warrant on them and say, I'm required to retrieve your firearms, and that you will now be able to go before a judge. Next myth is people will attempt suicide another way if their firearms are removed. You know, why bother doing this? They're going to kill themselves some other way anyhow. The fact is, 85% of attempts by gun end in death. Whereas when it's a non-firearm attempt, studies have shown that it's only about 5%. So if it's like something like pills, it's a much lower success rate. Next is, this won't stop all mass shootings and suicides. Yep, that is true. It won't stop all mass shootings and suicides, but it is one vital added tool for prevention, better than just simply doing nothing or pretend that nothing can be done. I hear often over the years, anytime a gun law is proposed, I often hear the gun lobby folks saying, you know, don't pass these laws. You're just punishing good law-abiding gun owners. You need to focus on the dangerous people. Focus on the dangerous people. Well, that's what the red flag law does. It tries to identify people who are in danger. They're a risk to their own lives or to others. You have to provide some evidence, and you're doing something about it. You're doing something about the dangerous people, and yet so many people in the gun lobby oppose this law, and I just don't get it. We're really trying to respond to something that's one of their complaints. Okay, a little bit of background. You might be saying, well, how is this going? You passed this law in 2019, went into effect in 2020. How's it been going? So in the first 3 years, there have been over 380 petitions filed. And this goes against another one of the myths. One of the things that we heard when this law was proposed, oh, there's going to be thousands and thousands of petitions filed, and you're just trying to take guns away from people just because they have a gun collection or just because they're known to be avid gun users. And no, it has not been abused. We've seen 380 in the first 3 years. The majority have been filed by law enforcement, and those were much more successful than petitions that were filed by members of the public. Why is that? Well, the citizen filings made more mistakes. One of the bigger mistakes, a couple of the bigger mistakes, one is you have to file the petition in the county where the respondent lives. So let's say you have a parent that is there in La Plata County and their child is up there in Uray County. They would have to file it in Uray County. Now, that law was updated this year to change that for household members. Household members can file it where they live, but all the other folks, like the professionals, the medical professionals and folks like that, they have to file in the county where the respondent lives. If you don't, it's simply going to be thrown out. So that could be one of those mistakes that throws it out. Another common reason that they've been thrown out is the judge just really wasn't convinced that it was that much of an emergency situation, that the person really wasn't that high a risk. Didn't convince the judge that it was that impending. Petitions we have seen have been filed for prevention of suicides, mass shootings, and domestic violence, all kinds of situations. Denver has had the highest number of filings, but there have been filings in a total of 40 counties. And that has included these Second Amendment sanctuary counties. You're probably familiar with this, the counties where the commissioners and or the sheriffs have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuary counties, where they've said, you know, we're not going to follow these state laws if we don't like them, including the red flag law. And yet we've seen that there, and I know that La Plata County is not one of those counties. That's very nice. There are 38 of those Second Amendment sanctuary counties. ERPOs have been filed in over half of those counties. So they can't say there's not a need or that they aren't going to enforce them, because they have been filed in those counties. And one example of that is Weld County, where the sheriff there has been very vocal about not agreeing with red flag and saying he's not going to enforce it. But despite that blustering, they have enforced red flag filings in Weld County. Let's see, there have been more than 168 1-year or more ERPO orders issued. So you see that we've had 380 filed, more than 168. So you've seen a lot of them have been denied. For individuals, where individuals filed for an ERPO, 186 were filed, 61 temporary orders were granted, and 30 1-year. ERPOs granted. So you can see that success rate for individuals is pretty low. In roughly half the ERPO cases, the respondent has been accused of threatening other people. In about a third of the cases, they were reportedly considering suicide. Whenever law enforcement files, they have an 81% success rate compared to 70% for individuals. And we think a lot of that is because they're much more familiar with the court system, and they're probably going to be a lot more distinguishing. They're really going to be much more looking at how strong is this case. They don't want to have something thrown out by the judge. They want to make sure it's really a good case. And probably in many cases when they file, it's probably not because a family came and approached them. It's someone they know to be dangerous. And they say, well, okay, this person is out, but I know what a danger they are, and I'm going to go and file a petition. We see that there are big differences by county, as you might imagine. Again, the Second Amendment sanctuary counties will have a lower rate of filings, and you may have law enforcement much less willing to file themselves, and you may indeed even have judges willing to grant them if they are filed. And then finally, we see that Colorado has a bit of a lower usage rate than other states that have ERPO. That's why we think it's important to get the word out about the red flag law, so that maybe if there are more cases where it could save lives, we want to make sure that people know about it and know that it's a tool they can use. And at that point, I'm going to go ahead and entertain your questions. I'll end this here by a quote from somebody who was a respondent who said, "You saved my life." And I'm familiar with this particular case. It was, I believe, out of Connecticut. This was a veteran, and he was an older man, and he was caring for his wife in his home, and she passed away in his care there at home. So it was a pretty traumatic experience for him, for her to pass away. The ambulance folks came to take her away, and he made a statement to them to the effect that, like, it was like, something to the effect that, my life is over. What's the point of going on? I see no point in going on. And they reported this to law enforcement. They placed an ERPO on him. They removed his firearms. He had a pretty large collection of firearms. He was not at all happy about it. But after they were removed, through counseling and him talking to some neighbors and friends, and them providing some advice to him and showing their concern towards him, he got through that crisis. The ERPO was removed. He thanked them and said that, "You saved my life. I'm glad you did this. I know that I was not nice to you at first when this happened, but I was better off." So at that, I will take your questions.
Okay, we've got a couple questions I think you've partially answered. It seems like back when the Colorado law was first passed, there were a fair number of sheriffs said they weren't going to enforce it. Are there counties in Colorado now where your chances of getting law enforcement to enforce an order are practically zero, or is everybody pretty much bought into the fact that they have to do this when there's a proper process?
I think there's a pretty good understanding they have to do it. I think if anything, there's more. I mean, once the judge says, "I'm granting this," law enforcement would have a pretty tough time to say, "We're not going to do it." I think the bigger issue is that they're not going to pursue it themselves. They're not going to be maybe terribly helpful. But I think once the warrant is issued, it would be a pretty bad thing if they were to say, "We're not going to go forward with the warrant." it might be more of an issue of a judge being more inclined to not liking this law and not wanting to grant the protection order in the first place.
Yeah, that was the other question that we had, whether there are in fact judges that, pretty much won't grant it no matter what.
Yeah, we don't have direct evidence. Another thing that's important to note here is that unfortunately the reporting requirements weren't real specific or real strong. So you're really having to dig hard. We have one member of our board who, as part of her getting her master's degree, did research in this, and it took a lot of legwork in trying to find records that she could use to find out. So we mostly have more just a general overview of cases. In some counties, you can get a bit more details, and in others not. So it's hard to see. You wouldn't really be able to determine what the judge was saying when he denied a petition request.
Okay, I think that's the last of the questions we have, but I'll throw one more out there. It seems to me, I lived in Texas before we moved up here, and it seems to me that in Texas, if you did not store your gun safely and it was stolen and used to commit a crime, that you as the owner who had not stored it safely were at least in some way responsible for being held, for that crime having happened. Do we have anything like that in Colorado? I mean, I think you said it was just a misdemeanor if somebody doesn't store their gun properly. Right.
And again, the penalty is pretty low. If you fail to report it, I think that it goes up. I think the penalty does go up if it happens more than once, because then that really is an indication that you may be trafficking in guns. And if you keep saying, "Oh, my gun was stolen, or I lost it. I don't know where it is." Gee, that's what we're really trying to cut down on.
Yeah.
But I think that's a law that probably not a lot of people know about. But I'm surprised that Texas, of all states, would have a law like that. That's interesting. I've got to follow that up.
Yeah, like I said, that's the way I remember it. It's been 10 years since I lived there, and I may not have gotten good information in the first place, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it was set up. So, okay, Karen, I don't see any other questions. I see you put a couple of announcements in the chat.
Before you do, could I add just one more thing? I provided to Gwen, I think he's going to distribute this. We have I've written a paper that's called "Responding to the Arguments of Gun Rights Activists." And I do a lot of what I did here, where I presented the objections, because to me, what's really important, if you really want to deal with having a civil discussion about the gun violence issue, instead of just resorting to the typical kind of cliches that you hear, only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. We need to have a fuller discussion. So what I did, I wrote this paper that presents the kinds of arguments that you hear, like I presented here against the red flag law. I present the arguments of the other side, and then I presented a response to those, so that hopefully, when you get engaged in discussions with someone who's less inclined to support stronger gun laws, how you can respond to it in a helpful way. So hope you all. And we'll probably distribute that at the July 2nd meeting that's going to be held down there in Durango.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you send me that, Tom, I'll make sure that it goes out in the email to everybody who registered when I send them the link to the recording.
Great, we'll do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd really love to have that. Like to read that ahead of time, Tom, and then we can have it. If you guys look up in the chat at July 22nd, that's a week from Saturday. So it's a week from this coming Saturday, an in-person event at the Durango Library from noon to 3. And so we're inviting all the local people who might want to be involved, the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department. And so if you know anybody, mark this on your calendars, let your friends know it's happening. it'll be in person. I think they'll be giving out gun locks, things like that. And we'll have Tom's handout, which would be great. And Tom may
You
or may
might
not-
have Tom too. I have to wait and see.
we'll see. The next announcements I put in there, August 3rd, we have a free film at the library at 6 o'clock. American Hospitals, Healing a Broken System. You won't be happy when you leave the film, but you'll be, driven to help us push for a better healthcare system. And then August 5th on Saturday, our annual picnic is out at, I didn't put the location there, but it's on the La Plata Dems website. The speaker is Kathy Plomer, who's the at-large seat of Colorado State Board of Education. And it costs $20 donation, and you can register at laplatadem's.org. And then mark your calendars for this. We're having a Drag the Vote event. September 23rd is a Saturday night. So at 7:30, the Fort Lewis College Theater. It is free. And we're going to have a drag show, and going to be so much fun. Our celebration of freedom and equality will be better than whatever they're going to celebrate at the La Plata, the Ute Casino in Ignacio, where Lauren Boebert and Matt Gates will be speaking at their Lincoln dinner. So please mark your calendars and come to that, and tell your friends about all these things. We're going to put these up on the website as well. Does anyone else have any announcements?
I'll just add one thing on the picnic. We're asking for a $20 donation, but if that's not something that is comfortable for you, feel free to sign up and show up. It's potluck, so you'll be bringing something to help feed people. So if you can make the donation, that's great. If not, show up anyway.
All righty. We're skipping August, so our next our next club lunch is September 5th at noon, and we are going to let you know who the speaker is at that point. The Dems always need volunteers for various things. We have projects going on all the time. Sign up at laplatadem's.org. Keep an eye out for our emails, and please share them with your friends, even if your friends aren't Dems, or if they want to get involved in better local governance, even on up to our congressional seat, please tell them to come to some of our events. So I want to really thank you, Tom, and let's give a round of applause for this great presentation. It was very informative. I think
Thanks.
the thing that stuck out
Thanks for the
to
opportunity.
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me the most, that I wonder if people really take in, is in suicide, 85 of attempts by guns end in death, because it's so quick and easy, and people don't even have to decide way ahead of time. I know a lot of suicides don't think much about it, and if a gun is there, it's done. And 5% of attempts by non-firearms are successful, and that is really, it's really amazing. So I'm so glad everybody's pushed for this law, and Tom, for your work ever since your son's death. It's thank you so much for continuing. It's a big deal.
Welcome. It's how I honor my son.
Yeah. A recording of this will be on the website in a day or two, so you can share it with your friends as well. So thank you all very much.